vrienden, it's good to be back with you. It's good to speak to you again about this book, which is called Scripture Twisting, 20 Ways in Which the Cults Misread the Bible by James W. Sire. I've actually looked at quite a few objections in the past, and I think we're already at the 11th objection, which makes this very good. So this week we're going to look at the selective citing of biblical texts. Now, James W. Sire says this is where only a portion of text or on a subject is quoted to substantiate a given argument. Whereas if we read the full survey or quotation of a relevant text, we can see quite clearly that it does not really support the argument. And I thought of two texts that is usually used from biblical Unitarians. I recently had Jehovah's Witnesses come to visit me, and we are in conversation. And so I thought about two texts that they usually like to quote, and both of them come from John's Gospel, where a part of the text is used and quoted where it does not really, in the full context of the text, show adequately what that scripture is saying. So let me give you two examples. The one comes from John 17 verse 3, and this argument basically says that the objection is usually that the Father is stipulated here by Jesus as the only true God. But I always say to my friends when I read this text, well, just read a little bit further. Clearly, if you read a little bit further in verse 5 and verse 24, Jesus in that text affirms his own pre-existence with the Father. In verse 10, it shows, and he shows that he possesses everything together in unity with the Father. I'm not even going back to chapter 1, verse 1, that says that Jesus unambiguously states, and the author of the Gospel of John states quite clearly that he was God. So just from the reading of the text, it does not say the Father is greater in ontology, but it simply means the Father is greater, obviously, in this mission of the Son, because the Son subjects himself to the Father. Another example that biblical Unitarians like is also, this is probably the famous or the most favorite proof text that come from Unitarians. It's from John 14:28. And, again, like I said, Jesus here again states, the Father is greater than I. Well, again, if we read that text in the same chapter, we can see quite clearly that in verse 1 of chapter 14 of John, we can see that Jesus speaks of him and the Father that should be ascribed with the same form of faith necessary to attain a healthy form of salvation. The Son is described again in verse 7 as the only way to the Father, which is interesting because that makes the Son greater, doesn't it? Because the Son is now the only way to get to the Father. No, it simply means that functionally the Son is in that function the one that communicates that indwelling with the Father and the Son in that personal relationship. So the Son is not greater than the Father. Because of that, the Son is merely taking a different function, but him and the Father, they are both equal in all things. Also, in verse 14 of John 14:14, we can see quite clearly that the Son is the one that we should pray to, and we should actually petition the Son for us to receive any form of answered prayer. So in a way, the Son shows again that we should pray in his name. So the Son's name is greater in a sense than the Father, even though the Son also, I would say, teaches us to pray, our Father who art in heaven. But the point is just simply that we can see all throughout the text that there is this connection between the triune God. And I love John 14:15-18. It's probably one of the most beautiful passages explicating a direct understanding of the doctrine of the Trinity. Then in the end of chapter 14 of John, verse 27, Jesus says, I leave my peace to you. And Jesus grants us peace. He's the one that grants peace. So, in other words, when we read both John 17 and John 14, we can see quite clearly when we put those texts in context, we can't leave it open for any pretext or any reading into the text. So you get my point? Just read the context, all of it, and scripture will make sense. Okay, so that is the objection, and I hope you enjoy this. Remember to subscribe, share this with someone, and watch all of the other clips I've made. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll speak with you again soon.